Morning, Mary. How you doing?
Great. How are you today, Ryan?
Doing good. I am glad you're on the show. You and I have quite a few mutual friends. We met through the Grow Florida and CEO Nexus. And was it 2 years ago that we met each other at the retreat, or was it just last year? Can't remember. But you have got a lot of fun stuff going on, and you've got a book that is coming out, and you have a lot of stuff that I'm excited to dive into. So for the listeners that are not familiar with you, maybe just kind of give us your background. How did you get into the world of entrepreneurship and women leadership? I mean, I know you've got a huge passion for it, and we've got a lot to talk about. But what was the journey to where you are today?
Well, thank you for asking. I started out in consulting. I was one of those people that always wanted to be a consultant. And when I got out of graduate school, my background's leadership and organizational development, organizational behavior. I worked for two large firms. So I had the opportunity to really cut my teeth working with big companies and seeing how they assessed and developed leaders. When I started my own firm, because I've always been an entrepreneur, when I was a little kid, I always sold the most Girl Scout cookies in my troop. And I used to, set up little stands and sell flowers and baked goods and all of those kinds of things. I always loved that. So I thought, well, I do this for big companies. Why can't I do it myself? And so when I started my firm, one of my clients actually recommended me to Inc. magazine. At the time, Inc. was setting up a program for CEOs called the Inc. Eagles CEO program. And I, together with other people from across the country, were hired as subcontractors. And they asked us to help them design and implement the Inc. Eagle CEO program. And because in my work, I had done so much executive coaching and also facilitation on a professional level in love to design things, I was one of the people who helped make the program be really, really successful. Implemented it here in Tampa as well as other places and had some great entrepreneurs. The one thing I noticed in my work with entrepreneurs is despite my best efforts, and it really hasn't changed because I still work with a couple of CEO groups that you've spoken to, is that I can't find as many women. So we always have a few women that are part of our
Yep.
roundtables, but there's a dynamic of it's lonely at the top for entrepreneurs that plays out for entrepreneurial women, but it also plays out for women in leadership roles in larger companies. So that's where I got the idea to start the Key Women's Leadership Forum. And the purpose of the forum is to bring together women who are in leadership roles, usually more senior leadership roles, like the CFO, COO, and again, CEO of their own entrepreneurial company, to not only focus on business issues, but to focus on what's purposeful for them, mind, body, spirit, and career. And so we go deeper than perhaps some other board of advisor type peer groups in our sessions. And it helps women with some of the unique obstacles that they face in what they do. So I continue working with entrepreneurs, male and female, and really loving this program, which is expanding. We have 7 forums running in Tampa, 1 in Sarasota, and we're about to start 1 in Atlanta.
That's super exciting. And explain the book that is about to come out. So you and I had talked about the complications and hardships of writing a book. So you got a book about to come out, and what inspired you to write the book?
Well, but I've always liked writing, and I like to write about not only my experience, but to compile things so people don't have to synthesize things from a variety of different places. So this is actually my 4th book. First book was called The Entrepreneurial Cat, 13 Ways to Transform Your Work Life. And it uses the analogy of the cat to help entrepreneurs look at some guiding principles to be more effective. Things like focus while hunting or clean the litter box. So then I wrote a book called CEO Road Rules, Right Focus, Right People, Right Execution. And in it, we interviewed over 50 CEOs of successful companies and shared the real secrets of what made them successful. A lot of the things you do around exit and the things that really need to be in place with a vision and operational excellence, growth, having those advisors and reaching out. This book really compiles for women some of the strategies and competencies and techniques they can use because women do encounter things very differently in the business world than men do in general. And that's why a lot of women become entrepreneurs. It gives them more freedom. But there are things that women struggle with, like, for example, I might say to you in a very straightforward way, Ryan, I'd really appreciate it if you would do X. And if I say that to you and you have a little bit of a gender bias, you're going to say, wow, where is she coming from? How can she talk to me that way? When a guy would say the same thing to you and you wouldn't have that reaction. We see that in meetings a lot. Like some of these women are the only woman on an executive team or one of few, and they'll bring up a great idea. Nobody seems to hear them, like tone deaf. And then 15 minutes later, a guy will bring up the same idea and everybody gets excited. So these are some of the kinds of things that women experience in leading that don't always happen to men.
It is so interesting, and you and I have talked because I'm excited to unpack this topic because and Mary, when you and I were on the phone and we were chatting, I just said that I've interviewed some absolutely badass entrepreneur women, and they've done some spectacular things from their culture to growing these big companies, and it's a totally different leadership style than a lot of men, and actually I think it lends them to be very successful because of how open they are about asking for help, and also being able to help coach people up and then be willing to like accept different ideas. And I'm just curious, as we kind of unpack this, Mary, like, what are the main challenges that you see, because you gave a perfect example, but what is the root cause of this? I mean, what is it that because I talked to very self-aware and successful males, and they would, I think a lot of them would agree with you, but then why is there a problem, and what's the root of it?
Sure, sure. And that is such a key question. And I'll come back to it. I just want to say a couple things because you said something earlier that really resonated with women's strengths. The book is Seizing Success, A Woman's Guide to Transformational Leadership. And one of the underlying premises of the book is that, and something I think that women need to pay attention to that you're noticing, is that women have strengths that can help them now and into the future be a transformational leader. So
Hmm.
let's unpack what's a transformational leader.
Yeah, yeah.
It's someone that has an inspiring vision. It's someone that is more likely to see we instead of I, collaborative. Countless studies show, in general now, that women tend to be more collaborative than men. They are bent toward wanting to coach and develop others. That's an aspect of being an entrepreneurial leader. Entrepreneurial and also a transformational leader. Transformational leaders also engage others. Well, how do they do this? They create meaning for the people that work for them. So if I work for someone, they can show me how what I'm doing, even if it seems mundane and just boring, how that activity really contributes to a bigger picture. And I shift my thinking there.
Yep.
And then, lastly, this idea of developing others to develop your successor is something all good entrepreneurs do. And I think women are particularly bent toward it. And so, in the past, there's been a more autocratic model that has helped organizations grow. We're really leaving that, even in entrepreneurial companies. I know we talk a lot about, there's many entrepreneurial companies that do really, well with culture and engagement. There are a lot that don't. I mean,
More
I've
so.
worked now with entrepreneurs for over 20 years. And I can tell you, many entrepreneurs have control issues. They're entrepreneurs because they want to control everything.
Yep.
And they don't care about collaboration. So my point here is that women can take some of these strengths and really build on them. Now,
Well,
there's some
yeah.
things that in general, men at times do better. And again, they're extreme. So you've got these badass women who go for it, which is great. A lot of women are less are less risk taking or more risk adverse than men under stress. In fact, some studies show that when men are under stress, they tend to take more risks and chances, which can result in something very positive for an entrepreneur. Women, on the other hand, tend to freeze up more under those situations they grow up, people, and this gets to your next question, why does this happen? If you've got a girl, don't you? Don't you have a little girl?
I've my whole life is around my women. I've got two twin girls that are almost 3. I've got a wife, and then my black lab is a female too.
Okay, well, we can talk about your twin girls here. Um, we bring up girls differently. We reinforce girls for being good, for being perfect, for getting good grades. Some little girls rebel, but being nice is important. So we ingrain that there. And, little Johnny, as long as he shows up for his class and doesn't create too many problems, parents are better with that. And so it starts young, but there also is a gender bias. The characteristics that we admire in a leader, being decisive, being assertive, being quick, and in terms of response, these are things that line up with our view of men, but it still doesn't line up for many people, not all but many, for women. And so women have that gender bias. In my
It's
book, I talk about a study that Sheryl Sandberg also talked about, was done at Harvard, and it was about an entrepreneur. So it's an interesting case study for your listeners, in that there was a very successful entrepreneur, Heidi Rosen. Harvard wrote this case study on how she built her entrepreneurial company. They changed one thing. They gave half the MBA students, who all have to be at Harvard with work experience. So these are not people just coming out of a 4-year
okay.
college.
Yeah.
They're working on their MBAs.
Yep.
Half got the case study that said Howard Rosen, and
Mm,
half got the case study that said Heidi Rosen. And to a statistically significant level, the students, both male and female, made comments like, Heidi is talented, but I sure wouldn't want to work for her. And the same case study, Howard is a great guy. He's a talented entrepreneur. It would be great to work with him. The only thing that was changed in the case study, which was written, you can see a video of anybody, was the name of the person.
so crazy, isn't it?
It is
I mean,
crazy.
so
So these are some of the roots of why
yeah, yeah.
there is this going on. And that's why, in addition to writing the book and talking about strategies women can use to be more confident, to be more assertive, to handle the pressure to perform better. That's another thing that happens for women. You and I could walk in and you could say you're a successful consultant running your own firm, and people would, unless you really screwed up, they'd probably buy that, right? A lot of women will walk in to the same situation and feel like people are scrutinizing them to make sure that they really can do what their title indicates.
Hmm.
And so that's another form of so there's this pressure of, I have to be performing, I have to get it right because I'm being judged.
It's a lot of pressure, and you're kind of going back to, because you made a lot of really good points, and I just going back to some of the other conversations that we've had in the past. We're like, and it might be my age, because it just, in potentially some of the people that I've interviewed and the sheer amount of companies that I see into, where like you listed all those all those characteristics of a transformational leader. Regardless of whether you had male or female in it, those are like the best definitions of a leader. And it's like
Right.
collaborative coaching, developing up, and just some kind of some thoughts on some of the comments is like, it's like almost such a duh to me, because you look at that and you say, well, all of those things, if you think about all the things that on all the CEO peer groups that you're involved in, I talk to a lot of them. Everybody complains about trying to hire people today. Well, it's like, because
There's a real talent void.
there's a talent void, but so then therefore the people that have dictatorships in their companies, you're not gonna, like, why would you want to go work for someone like that? You want, like, I even
Yeah.
said to this woman yesterday, I was like, yeah, my wife's old company, it was a good, successful, profitable company, but like all she wanted was someone to say thank you, like, we're appreciating what you're doing, and it just was not a culture of that, which is just ridiculous. And I think,
Hmm.
you know so not only is that, I think a lot of these characteristics very leaning towards the conscious capitalism leader, like you and I've talked about, but
Hmm.
also, Mary, like the companies that I work in. Like, the problem that most of these entrepreneurs have is because they've been the person, because of whatever, maybe by ego reasons, or they just had all this stuff in their head, they don't have a number two or a next developed leadership, and their company's literally worth like a fourth of what it could be because
Right.
of their egos or their need to want to touch everything. And so it's just like this weird dynamic now where there's, I think the world is kind of teeing it up where I think women could take the reins or become the next level of leadership. Or I don't know. It, like I said, it almost is like a no brainer to me, but it just doesn't seem like it.
Well, that's one of the reasons I wrote this book, to encourage women, because I think the external environment never has been this good. Over 25% of Congress, for the first time in our history, coming up on 4th of July, our nation's history, are women. And we have women 2020 on boards. I'm active with that, wanting 20% of publicly traded companies, I think all companies, but 20% to be made up of women. And the state of California recently passed a law where any company registered in California will be required to have 20% women on their boards. So this external, the Me Too movement, people calling out on others. I was just listening to I love film, and I was just listening to Bob Mondello, who is a great film critic, talk about this new movie coming out called Maiden. It's a documentary about a woman captain in the yacht races, and all the whole crew was all female. And this was it's coming out now, but it was filmed, this actually happened quite a few years back. And they show the prejudice that these women had to go through, and how, even the questions that they get asked, and how that relates to what you do is that women are asked questions that are more protection oriented, like, well, how are you going to do that? Or, what are you going to do to avoid this? Whereas when men are interviewed, entrepreneurs, they're many times the questions they get asked are growth questions. So, where do you see your company growing in the next 5 years? And so there's even a distinction sometimes, which is not always conscious, and the kinds of questions women get asked when they have the same job as a guy.
Interesting.
And so now, through the environment putting a squeeze on people in terms of hiring talent, maybe some people running companies will look at a woman for a number two that they might not have.
I actually
And
think, sorry, I want to jump on that.
that's what you were saying, right?
Oh, well, I
Earlier.
was gonna say, I actually honestly believe that there, so I take like a handful of my really good customers, and honestly, people that I see at these, CEO roundtables is like, you have an owner that has grown a company that has grown a great culture. Like, let's say, like, they do have a great culture. They are the humble entrepreneur, and they've built this, and they might have had more of the sales leadership role, so they had to hire like more of the operational people, right? So the doers, getting stuff done, making stuff that things are tight. There's a gap being able, like, to hand off. Some of the reason that these entrepreneurs can't leave is because there's no, like, handoff of the culture baton, which is really challenging because it's been a humble, great, culture CEO. So I think that there's an opportunity for women to come in as that next gen leader, because
Uh-huh. I
because
agree.
it's a huge home run for everybody. I honestly believe it.
It really is. And I think that part of the development for women, so, through these key women leadership forums that I and some of my partners facilitate, one of the things that we do is we really give people a safe place to work on, how can I be a better leader? Everybody has a leadership scorecard. We track that and provide quarterly coaching in addition to the monthly meetings. And I have seen so many women prepare themselves for that number two slot. Just recently, one of the women that's been a member for quite some time went from almost leaving the organization to working on strategies with the CEO, and now she's been made the number two person, and just knocking it out of the park.
That's
The
awesome.
other thing that happens for women, on their end, is that many times women feel like they have to have all the qualities and characteristics to fulfill a job. And this has been an observation at a lot of organizations. Facebook, for example, has observed this, that they might put out a description internally, and maybe a guy has 50, 60% of what is required for that job, and they throw their hat in. And some of these talented women that
Yeah.
like have 90, 95% of everything they need, they get asked, why didn't you apply? And they said, well, I don't think I have all the things I need yet.
Why is
So,
that?
well, again, it goes back to this perfection and this questioning themselves in terms of confidence. I was talking to a book publisher who said, "Oh, how can you talk about executive women not being confident?" Well, I have to tell you that confidence is an issue. It's not like the normal confidence you see, being able to speak in front of a room or stand up for something they believe in, but just having the resilience to stay confident when the rest of the group doesn't see it the same way is seems to be more challenging for women.
What is the underlying cause of that? I mean, is it like because I mean, I remember when I read those stats, and I think a lot of male entrepreneurs probably tend towards like the risk taking and then the sales, which I think salespeople, women or men, like you do.
Yeah, they do. I mean, again, I'm talking
Yeah,
generalities here,
yeah.
right?
No, but I
The
love
bell
it. But,
curve.
I think you're right though. Is like why like is it what is the root cause of the lack of confidence when they're
Well, I
that
don't think
skilled?
there's one thing, but I do think that gender bias is a huge factor. So, at a fairly young age, women are treated differently. And when they don't we talked earlier about assertiveness. So,
Mhm.
when a woman asserts herself, she's a
It
bitch. When a
yeah,
guy
yeah,
asserts
yeah,
himself, he's a decision maker.
yeah,
So that that does, try your confidence. So,
yeah.
a lot of the badass entrepreneurial women I know, just decided to create their own system because they didn't want to put up with it anymore.
Yeah, I
That's why
bet.
so many women are becoming the entrepreneurs. That and the fact that they can create a situation with better work-life integration than they might be able to if they work for a big company. So there's not one thing,
Yeah.
but there is a gender bias. There is a perception of women being different, and that sometimes when they come across with the masculine, I put masculine in quotes,
Yep.
characteristics that we've already discussed, they're not seen the same way. Now, one thing that's interesting is some of the research I've looked at talks about how women can improve how they come across and be more assertive if they were to pay more attention to some of the nonverbal things, because people don't react as negatively at all to nonverbal assertiveness. So, what does that look like? Nonverbal assertiveness is making eye contact with people. It's sitting straight up, shoulders back. It's taking up space, kind of a positive version of mansplaining.
Yeah. Yeah.
Taking up the space and not like, and not necessarily, you know, hanging with every word the person makes. So, sort of non-verbally and verbally, then saying, well, thanks, and then going on to the next thing. And so there's an assertiveness that women can show non-verbally that has a better response, which is very interesting to me.
That's very interesting. And that right there, it's like, from all the sales training I've had for the decades I've been doing sales, like that's kind of like what you're taught. And that stuff
Yes.
takes a lot of work because you have to be so aware in the moment to be able to
Right.
like being conscious of that stuff and changing it. It's very challenging.
As a good salesperson, you know that also the non-verbally mimicking what your prospect is doing, how they're holding themselves, how they're describing things, to mirror that can be a very powerful non-verbal way of asserting as well.
So sorry, just totally kind of going back to one of the previous points because I'm curious on it. Is like, I think, as we were talking about the labor force being so tight and the millennials coming in, the work-life balance, all these different kind of things that are stewing into making it very difficult for, owners to maintain as is, like it was forever.
Mhm.
I mean, are you seeing that just women are able to hire and recruit better? Because I mean, I go back to that. You said we, not I, which that
Mhm.
alone just makes that one thing ripples into everything in a culture. Like you can always tell the entrepreneur that's saying we, and it's just not about them. But then it kind of trickles into all these other things that, I mean, women have to be like super succeeding in recruiting, maintaining, developing people today compared to, other times in the past.
Well, with what's going on recruiting wise, recruiting and hiring is a skill. It's a competency and also requires a system that both men and women can learn. I think where women can excel is in creating a culture that attracts talent. Millennials, especially, don't want to necessarily work for the most fast paced, prestigious company where they make a lot. They want to work somewhere where they're appreciated, where they're engaged, and they're part of a culture that feels rewarding to be part of if they're going to spend time there. And I think, and that's why this my book, Seizing Success: A Woman's Guide to Transformational Leadership, is so important. A man and a woman can both be a transformational leader.
Hmm.
A transformational leader is someone who is open to leading and growing together with employees and taking not only the company to the next level, but also all of the people, including the leader, growing together. And so there's an element of trust, an element of collaboration, an element of what we're doing is important. That's where the social capital, women are very interested, for example, in situations where they are not only doing something that contributes to business, but that there is a wonderful byproduct that comes from that. I work with an entrepreneur, Dr. Danny McVetti, who started a company called Lap of Love, and she's a great vet and very entrepreneurial. And she's built a huge, wonderful, successful business by linking doctors all over the country that use some of her processes to help people whose animals are at the last stage of their life, in many cases before they're euthanized. And it's a very successful business, but it keys into her passion. And I think, and of course, people involved with it feel like what they're doing is very purposeful because it's a hard
Hmm.
topic, but it's so gratifying to see that all of us who love our pets are getting the kind of care and help that they deserve. And
Uh,
so, I think women are more bent toward those kinds of things many times in being an entrepreneur, as opposed to the traditional model. And there are men and women that both adopt the traditional model, but what I'm calling the traditional model of let me build my business, let me make it scalable, let me make
make
it
money,
replicable,
make me
let me
money.
look at my options, let me cash out, get the best multiple I can, and okay, now I made all this money, and that's it.
Well, it's so interesting, Mary, like when you and I were talking about that, because I've been bringing up conscious capitalism on the show quite a bit. And it's, the whole win to the sixth power where everybody has to win. And actually, these companies are over the last 10 years, they've over 10 or 15x the rest of the S&P, the ones that are conscious capitalist companies. I actually saw the founder of Ben and Jerry's speak like it was about a month ago, and I didn't know he was like one of the founders of like the B or the B Corp double bottom line kind of stuff. I don't think they were a B Corp, but anyways, like what I find interesting is
The triple bottom line, that's a
yep.
guy named John Renish out of California.
So the guy of Ben and Jerry's, he started this back in like well, he started doing anyways about like the community. He actually had the community buy into the business. Anyway, it was really really
Yeah. Oh no, it
cool.
was great. I mean, I'm aware of what they did, and everybody in Vermont got to buy a share,
Isn't that
and
cool?
I
And
wanted
so
more.
what I think is interesting about all this, kind of going back to what your point is that in today's world, it's like you can buy whatever the hell you want right now, right? And you can go work wherever you want. So it's like, why wouldn't you want to just have a good experience with someone else that's doing good? And I think because of how transparent the digital world has made, like to everything today, is you can find out someone that's an idiot or an asshole really fast. So like if
Go to
someone
Glassdoor, right?
right. So if someone has like only caring about their bottom line and is screwed over a vendor or an employee or a customer, like you're gonna find out anyway. So like literally the more successful you are is because you're just treating everybody well. And it's like kind of like duh. But that you list all the characteristics of the transformational leader, and it's like it checks all the boxes. I mean, it just all like aligns
Mhm.
very, very, very well.
It isn't just to clarify, and I want to say this, that anybody can be a transformational leader, and it's a great goal. It's not always easy. It does take self-awareness, and I think that for women right now, there are certain things that if they address them or assess themselves and build more competence in some of these areas, they could go toe to toe with anybody to be that transformational leader, and they already might be and just need some additional help. So, just really briefly, there's 7 chapters in my book, Seizing Success: A Woman's Guide to Transformational Leadership. The first is on confidence, which I mentioned. I say confidence, the secret sauce. There's a chapter on right focus, which gets into the development of your personal mission, vision, values, and what your core strengths are, so that you have a strong internal compass, which when women develop that, no matter what they choose to do, it brings so much to the table for them. And then handling the pressure to perform, what we talked about earlier. We did a study of 110 executive women, and after work life integration, pressure to perform was their top challenge, and something that they dealt with to the point at times it created tremendous stress in their lives. So those are like the 3 intrapersonal competencies or skill sets that are important to address and that help women become this transformational leader. Then there are a couple that I see in my work with the women's forums and being an executive coach to women in leadership roles, that there's a need to be more assertive and to know how to do that appropriately. So there's a chapter on assertiveness. There's a chapter on influence. Influence is simply the ability to get someone to take your lead. So a
Hmm.
lot of the stuff we've been talking about with leadership, again, influence is important for anyone who leads or who's an individual contributor or thought leader. So we talk in this chapter about some tools and strategies and techniques women can use to enhance how they influence and help them to better adjust to the influencing style of others so that the other person can hear them. And then we move to women in the world. There are 2 chapters there. One is on being a transformational leader and building on those strengths that we've already talked about. And the last chapter is on the power of peers, how to either join a peer forum or to start your own. And in it, I give away my secrets that for being a facilitator for over 20 years, not in entrepreneurial CEOs, but these women forums, which we've had going now for 5 years, because I want to see people better build their board of advisors, which is separate from the board of advisors that you talk about.
Hmm.
They're kind of run parallel,
Yep.
but it is a peer group of advisors. So
So
that's the
yeah,
book.
no, and I think you kind of answered some of the sequence of how do you take one step after the other, and I'm curious, obviously this is a good manual for people as they're looking at transforming themselves into something that they could be. But I'm curious, Mary, like what if you're sitting there and you're listening to this and you're paralyzed on where to, because you might have a belief that you can do this, but how do you shatter this belief to begin with? Like, how do you get that first level of confidence that is needed to even start the journey?
Well, one of the things that I've done in the book is it's not just here's some things that you can do and try. There are a lot of true stories of women at different stages in their careers. So it's not the kind of book that you interview a woman that's been wildly successful, Angela Merkel running Germany, or just the female president of a publicly traded company.
Hmm.
These are real women that have gone through various things and want to share how they learn things and how someone can apply this more immediately. Each chapter has strategies and thinking questions. So it's almost like having me sitting at their shoulder as a coach, having them pick a section and working through one. And when that happens and they try things, then it builds their confidence to try more. But it's taking the first step in the
Mhm.
journey.
So then
Now, if
let's,
somebody has paralyzing,
yeah,
uh,
keep going.
you know, a paralyzing reaction to building their career, not reading a book alone is not going to
Yeah,
help you.
right. You got to
And
talk to people.
therapy, other kinds of hypnosis, other kinds of things could come into play. But this is a great primer for
Yep.
anyone who's currently in a leadership role or who aspires to be. And I really encourage female entrepreneurs to get this book.
So then, if I were to flip it, and if you, let's say you're a male or a woman, I guess, but more so probably coming from the male's perspective, and you own a company,
Mhm.
and I think you and I would probably unanimously agree that like you should really look at a woman being your successor. If you can't sell to a third party, or if you want to have a legacy and an ESOP or have an internal transition, really highly look at a woman, because I mean, there's a strong chance that's going to be a great choice. What are suggestions you would have for someone like that may have not thought about this before, or might have different questions of how do you progress, or maybe the person's not even in the organization. Like, how would you start that journey
To hiring someone
to
that
think to
could
look
take.
at, yeah,
Well, I think first of all, you need to be really clear what is it that you want this person to do. And you and I both are acquainted with traction, so is the CEO a visionary, or do they tend to be more of an integrator? If you're hiring for an integrator, what are you looking for in an integrator? And then
I think it's
really
oh let
going
me
after people that you meet that, I think a CEO should always be looking at talent, not just when they need it. So when you're at conferences, when you're exposed to different people that you meet, LinkedIn is a wonderful source. But I do think it's very important to understand what's required in the job.
well, I was kind of like
I'm
thinking more
high on
like,
predictive index, so making sure the person's predictive index matches up with
mhm.
what the role is, and going for it shamelessly and saying, what, I'd like to have a woman in this role.
Well, and that's it, exactly, and I think I would totally ditto what you said, and I think more just putting under the magnifying glass, like, okay, like I'm gonna try something about this, like trying to find a woman, because I'm honestly just thinking about a good chunk of my clients where the owner has just done an amazing job building a great culture, like literally a great culture, and they're the visionary, they're the culture, the center of it all, and that's the hardest thing to transition, because they're like, oh, so and so would leave if this person left, right? And like that comment ripples across the whole organization if the integrator would to take over, right? Because the integrator is more of the drill sergeant, right? And so that person's leaving, so there's a big gap in that personality. And I'm like, is there places that, I mean, I just don't know if someone said, okay, like I actually do want to change my perspective and actually think about hiring a woman leader as my potential successor. Like, how do you, I mean, is it WPO to your organizations? I mean, where would you?
Well, there's a host of different types of organizations. Like there's women in executive leadership. Well, there are just so many different places. I think the trick for entrepreneurs is that they need to find someone that maybe has been part of an entrepreneurial company or has the skill set. One of the mistakes I see entrepreneurs making in hiring and selecting, and this is male or female, or if they're hiring male or female, is they get all excited about someone that has a great corporate background. Oh, they come from IBM. Well, that person goes to an entrepreneurial company. They have a lot of depth, but they don't have a lot of breadth. And
Yeah,
so, they're not used to all the different kinds of things you have to do in an entrepreneurial environment,
yeah,
and they fail.
yeah.
We're looking at a specific niche market, and again, that's a whole other topic. But we do have there's a woman I work with that is in one of my roundtables, and that you've spoken to in Sarasota, Sarah LaRoque. She's the CEO of Earth Balance. She had a male CEO who started the company. He smartly went into an ESOP, and Sarah was trained as a scientist. And he just observed the skills that she had, talked to her, on an ongoing basis way before he decided to make the transition. And she was appointed the CEO.
Super
And
cool.
she is in our roundtable because she is so hungry to learn, what do I need to do to be an effective CEO? And, so sometimes these people are right under your nose and they're not necessarily, from the same
Yep.
background,
Yep.
but
Yep.
if they have an interest.
Yep. No, I think it's very well put, and it's something that is just, it's so worth the effort to look. I mean,
Yeah,
the
it
upside so
really
huge.
is. And,
Yeah.
and to develop. But,
Yep.
and I think reaching out, if you have, for example, if you're in a peer forum, I can't tell you how many people, float different jobs that they have open. And just to say, do you have a talented woman in your organization that's stuck, or do you know of one? Because there's nowhere for them to go.
Hmm.
You'd be
Hmm.
surprised what comes up.
I love it, Mary. This
Yeah,
has been a blast. What is the
it
best?
has. Thank you
What?
so much for the opportunity.
Oh,
And
and what's the best way for everybody to find the book, to find you, and to get more
okay,
information?
I'm at Mary at keyassociatesinc.com. That's KEYASSOCIATESINC.com is the website. And my book is available on Amazon. There's a link that will allow you to pre-order the book, Seizing Success, A Woman's Guide to Transformational Leadership. And by the way, my husband, who is a wonderful editor, not professionally, but he's got a great eye for it, he was editing my book before it got published. And he was in reading it, he goes, "Hey, this stuff is good for me too." So even though it's geared toward a female audience,
You
I
have a
think you
smart
would
husband,
enjoy
by
it,
the
Brian. You
way.
would enjoy it.
That's awesome, Mary. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I had a blast.
You're so welcome.